Evan, how's it going? Yeah. Excuse me while I turn the streams on. Cool. Right. Cool. Yeah, cool. Let's go. Yeah, perfect timing. Yeah. Hello to everyone just joining. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. This is a little bit of an off-schedule stream, mostly because we didn't stream on Monday, so everything is pushed over by one day. Today we're cooking a Thai noodle stir-fry called Pad Thai. If you've never had Pad Thai, I would be very surprised if you've never had Pad Thai. Because at least if you're here in the States, I would be pretty surprised because it's like maybe the most common Thai takeout dish that you can find, at least in the States. So today we're doing a Pad Thai with a couple of not my favorite subs, but necessary subs because I ran out of Thai chili. So we're gonna take a look at some of the things that we're gonna be subbing today. A Pad Thai, in addition to having some fun ways to sub things out, is also a great example of how to batch cook, which is probably the most important thing that you need to keep in mind if you're trying to cook like we are today, Pad Thai on a home range, or especially if you're cooking it on an electric top range, because it contains so many different ingredients. So we're going to do a couple of things to work around our batch cook, or work around that heat retention issues that you will come across when you are trying to cook in a wok on a home range. Very often, I think probably the best example is yesterday we did a fried rice that did not have enough ingredients in it that would necessitate doing a batch cook. But super often you will see me doing batch cooking, which is essentially just pulling stuff out of the wok in batches and then cooking the next item while the wok is essentially empty, and that kind of helps you keep the wok really hot. Otherwise you run into issues with keeping the wok hot because the wok has too many things in it. So we're going to kind of like take a shot at what all of those things are and why it's so necessary, and we're going to talk through some of those things today. As always, with pretty much everything that I cook on stream, this particular Pad Thai recipe also already lives over on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen there. If you're watching on YouTube, you're already there, like Evan is. The Pad Thai recipe, I forget, it was one of the earlier recipes that we came out with. I think that was back in like maybe September or so in 2020. Those recipes, they're always out over every Friday though, so many Fridays ago we did a Pad Thai recipe that I think was initially out over on GIF recipes, if I remember correctly. And it uses a couple of subs. I believe the original recipe uses tofu. I think it's using firm tofu, and we did a sear on it. Today we're actually not going to use tofu, we're going to be using some chicken. But that original recipe is fully vegetarian. It's not vegan, but it's vegetarian. So if you have any questions about that, definitely drop them in the comments. I don't know everything about Pad Thai or Thai cooking or Thai noodles or anything really. But I know lots of stuff, so hopefully I can be helpful or informative, or at the very least entertaining to watch. And as always, if you're looking for those recipes, definitely find your way over to the YouTube channel. We're working our way to 4,500 subscribers by the end of this month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please do hop over and give it a subscribe. Lots of fun content coming up over there. Oops. Alright, so as with, guys, how's it going? Yeah. What's the play? Yeah, today we're doing a Pad Thai, which is like a super common here in the States, at least here in California. I don't know about elsewhere in the States. But here in California, it's probably the single most like commonly found Thai takeout dish. So when you go to a Thai restaurant, it's probably the most common or most popular one. What time is it? It's 6:30. Every time that we're streaming, anytime that we're streaming, it's always going to be live at 6:30 PST here in California. Coming in hot. Yeah, what's going on? What sauces should I get at the store? Yeah, if you want to start doing wok cooking. Lots of people ask that. That's kind of a tough one to do because it really depends on what kind of cuisine you're trying to cook, and like what are your what's the flavor palette that you're going for. So if we're just talking about like Chinese food, definitely like there's a handful of staples that are really easy to just like find. A lot of those are things that you don't necessarily even have to find at an Asian market. You can find a lot of those things just like straight up. Here in California, you would find them at places like Safeway or like Albertsons, Sprouts, Lucky's, stuff like that. Like just like a straight up American grocery store. So I would say like probably the number one most important like ingredient that goes into Chinese food is generally going to be soy sauce. If we're talking about Thai food, that is actually not necessarily true in Thai food. But if we're just talking about Chinese food, that's definitely going to be true. And soy sauce you could totally find pretty much everywhere. Actually, the reason that I bring that up is because today, for the first time in a while, we're not going to be using soy sauce at all. But yeah, other than that, I always say there's like maybe a handful of go-tos that I have in the pantry pretty much at all times. Probably soy sauce is the number one thing. Hoisin sauce is a really good go-to. Rice vinegar or some kind of bright acidic element. So rice vinegar, or you could do Shaoxing wine, or like dry cooking sherry, any kind of alcohol substance. Mirin or rice wine, just like sake, rice sake, would be all of which would be fall under the similar categories. So the way I always think about it is like, I like to think about it in like categories. So I'm talking about like elements that are going to bring like sweetness, like fermented sweetness to a dish. I'm thinking about specifically in the category of things like oyster sauce, hoisin sauce, fish sauce, stuff like that. That kind of falls under that category. When I'm talking about things that are going to bring heat to a dish, I'm thinking about like doubanjiang, maybe even like miso paste to a certain extent, sambal olek, gochujang, all of those things fall under that kind of category. And then when we're talking about like acidic elements, like I was mentioning earlier, then we're starting to talk about things like Shaoxing wine, and then sake, mirin, all of those things that are basically alcohol. So what I say is generally you want to start in the categories. So start looking at like the categories of things that those things fall under, and then you can start working backward from there. So like super often, like what I'll do is like when I run out of certain things, I'll find myself, I'll use like substitutions all the time, which not necessarily the greatest thing if you're trying to keep things super, super traditional. I definitely don't do substitutions when I'm like writing recipes or recording videos. But definitely on live stream, we're actually going to do a substitution today because I forgot to buy Thai chilies. So that kind of like, I think like the most important thing to think about when we're talking about like how to assemble a pantry of sauces is to just think about like what are the categories that those sauces fall under, and like how stocked are you in that like world. So like if I'm out of so for example, if I'm out of black vinegar, for example, that's a really easy substitution. I can just go and grab some rice vinegar. As long as I have some kind of rice vinegar, I'll be okay. And then if I'm out of like Shaoxing wine, then it's still okay because I still have sake or mirin, I even have a little bit of soju that we used one time. All of those things, they still fall under that category. So as long as I have some element in those categories, I'll still be okay because I can still swap things out and not necessarily have like destroyed the dish. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Yeah. Do I sharpen my own knives? Yeah, I do. I use a whetstone. That's probably like the most popular way of sharpening your knife. Like at least in like of recent years, you'll see whetstones. They look like this. A whetstone is essentially a big sanding block. So it kind of looks like really, really fine sandpaper. So this is a 6,000 and this is a 1,000. What we do is we soak it in water, and that's why you call it a whetstone when we run a knife on it. I'm not going to run my knife on it now because it's not wet. It would damage the knife. But yeah, if you're trying to like improve your knife technique, what I always say, people ask me like how to get or like where to get this knife or how to get your hands on an expensive knife. And I always say is that it's way more important to have a sharp knife than it is to have an expensive knife. A dull, expensive knife is no better than a really, really cheap but really, really sharp knife. So before you start investing in like really fancy knives, invest in a really, really nice whetstone first, and that's going to dramatically increase the quality of your cheap knife. Yeah. Hermina, yeah, how's it going? Hello. Okay, so what we're doing right now, so I just finished chopping up, those were my aromatics, so that was garlic and ginger. And then what we're chopping up right now, I think that was three or six, maybe it was 6 shallots. Yeah, I think that was 6 shallots, and we're going for rather pretty large sizes here. I generally don't like to go for super fine minces with these because I generally want to try and like have some form of that element still going on. So they're relatively large. If you don't like shallots or if you don't like chewing on like onions, chop them up a little bit finer and it'll still be okay. But what we're going to do is we're going to throw this into our oil, and then we're going to bloom out the aromatic qualities of these shallots, and then throw them into our tamarind paste and fish sauce. And that's going to sort of like infuse those aromatic elements into our sauce, which we're then going to distribute throughout the whole dish. And that's just really going to start like help us create this very like expansive flavor, so that like the flavor kind of like distributes throughout the whole dish rather than like only 1 or 2 things tasting like something. The whole dish will taste like something because we're going to be distributing that flavor very evenly. Yeah. Bergman, oh yeah, you think you hear that remix? Yeah, that's probably the Feel It Still remix. It's on all the time. All right, so next up, what we're doing here, so I was talking about substitutions earlier. Normally what I would like to be using is some Thai chilies, which are right here. We can take a look. Listen really close. They don't look so hot. This is my Thai chilies. This one is like right on the cusp. I could probably cut around some stuff. This one is looking okay. Usually what I like to be using is about like 4 to 6 Thai chilies. When they start looking like this, you probably should throw it out. I'm still going to use it just because I want to, and I think it's going to be okay. But generally, when they're at this case, it's not necessarily the greatest place to be. And what you should be doing is going out and buying some new Thai chilies. But I'm still going to use them. And in lieu of using those, what I'm also going to bolster it with is a little bit of jalapeno pepper, this is actually more than a little. This is a very large jalapeno pepper. I don't love this substitution. I actually think that the flavor of the Thai chili is like a really, really important quality. So like when we're talking about like the iconic flavors of Thai food, I would say maybe after fish sauce, Thai chili is one of the biggest and most important things that you can get out of Thai food. So without that Thai chili, it kind of changes the whole profile of the dish, which is why I'm still going to try and use these 2 relatively sketchy Thai chilies. But I have on many occasions made use of some jalapeno peppers in a Thai noodle dish. I've also made use of many other kinds of peppers. I've done it with bird's eye chilies. I've done it with serranos, Fresno chilies. All of those are going to work just fine. But if you can, I would say those Thai chilies, they're going to be really, really important to getting the flavor right. What I'm doing here though, so this is a really big jalapeno pepper. I think it came from Chinatown. What I'm doing here is I left half of the seeds in. Normally I would probably leave all of the seeds in, but this jalapeno pepper is so large that I don't think that's actually going to work. I think that's going to be way too many seeds, especially because we're adding Thai chilies too. So I left half of the seeds in. That's going to involve or like create a lot of the heat is all of those seeds. We're also going to leave the seeds into our Thai chilies too, and that's where all of the heat from our dish is going to come from today. Yeah, a nice fried chow. What are we cooking? Yeah, we're doing pad Thai today. So this is like a super common Thai noodle dish that you'll come across in a lot of like Thai takeout. Here in the States at least, it's probably maybe the most common Thai dish that you'll find. And I believe I've heard that it's super common in Thailand too. I haven't actually been there, so. So, ideally, if you were cooking this and you remember to buy them at the market, you should have about 4 to 6 of these Thai chilies. Today we have 2. And then what we're going to do is we're leaving all of these seeds in. I don't really see the point in de-seeding a Thai chili if you don't like heat. Then I would just say just leave the Thai chilies out. Because I don't know that there's really any other flavor to the Thai chili other than those seeds. So. But I'm going to add this in with our jalapeno pepper, and that's going to create all of the heat from our dish today. Hopefully it will do something. Thai chilies are a little bit sketchy. Yeah. Oh, Evan, you've never had Thai food. Oh man, you should definitely go and find yourself some Thai food for sure. All right, so next up, I actually have bean sprouts and they're only 1 day expired. So these are probably still gonna be okay. They're generally okay. You'll generally, if you're not sure, bean sprouts, they go bad really fast. They only have a shelf life of maybe like 3-4 days, maybe like a week you could get away with it. After that, what happens is they start giving up their water. And as they give up that water, it will sort of just like aggregate here at the bottom of the bag. And then it just sort of like turns into bean sprout mush, and it's really gross. So generally, I try and not to have leftover bean sprouts, but I almost always do because there's just no way to use all of these bean sprouts within a week. They're also really cheap, so it's not a big deal if you don't use them all up. But today I am going to do my best to use as much of these as possible. What we want to look out for if you're concerned that your bean sprouts are going to go bad, what you want to look out for is if they're like slimy, because that means that they have started giving up their water. So my bean sprouts are a little bit slimy, but not slimy enough where I'm concerned. And what we're going to do is I'm going to give these a rinse, and that's just about it. They're also extremely delicate, so when we're working with bean sprouts, we want to throw these into our wok fry really, really late. These are going to be like maybe the last thing that we throw into the wok fry, because if we throw them in any earlier, they're going to start falling apart, because they're going to start shedding their water inside of the wok fry, and that's not going to be good. And then you're going to end up with a really, really mushy bean sprout, because they're going to start coming apart in the wok heat. So I always recommend doing this anytime that we're working with really, really delicate veggies. We do the same thing when we're working with onions, for example, because they're also really delicate. So I'm just going to give it a quick rinse, and then this is going to be the last thing that goes into our wok fry. Right before the eggs, actually. So second to last. Yeah, good tip. Yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Let's see. Next up, I'm going to whisk up. This is going to be 2 eggs. I've gone back and forth on how many eggs to use here. I've definitely done this with 3 many times. I think that 3 eggs is probably a little bit excessive. I don't think you need 3 eggs. What we're going to do, though, is we're going to whisk these up. And then we're also going to throw them in right after the bean sprouts. So this will be the last thing that we throw in. So we were actually talking about this on the stream yesterday when we were doing a fried rice, where the eggs actually get into the wok relatively early. And what we're trying to do when we're creating a fried rice is we add those eggs while the wok is either while the wok is empty, or we're intentionally moving things around in the wok to make sure that those eggs hit the surface area of the wok. And that's what we're trying to do when we're making fried rice, is create these big curds of eggs. So we're basically trying to create scrambled eggs in a wok fried rice. When we're doing things like pad thai, though, however, that's actually not our goal. So our goal is actually not to create curds of egg. What we're trying to do instead is just coat the noodles itself in some eggs. So that means that we have to treat them very, very differently, because essentially what we're going to do is add them at the very, very end after the noodles have been added, so that we end up with noodles that are coated in egg rather than egg curds, which is not what we're after. Yeah. All right, so last up, I'm going to assemble, before we do our noodles, I'm going to assemble my sauce here. So I'm going to go with a couple of things here. First up, this is actually pad thai sauce, which is not my favorite ingredient, but for the life of me, I can't seem to find tamarind paste. Tamarind paste is probably the single most iconic thing to a pad thai. You can make a pad thai without pretty much, if you don't have pretty much everything that we've used today, you can still pretty much make a pad thai. You cannot make a pad thai without pad thai sauce or tamarind paste. Pad thai sauce, if you're not sure, or if not sure what a pad thai sauce is, first of all, it looks like this. It literally will say pad thai sauce. And it contains a couple of things. Mainly what it contains is tamarind paste. It will also contain other things most of which are things that we just finished chopping up. We're also going to add it to the sauce. I think it contains a little bit of shallot. It probably has a little bit of garlic. I think there's some cumin that's in there. I'm pretty sure there's a little bit of fish sauce that's involved too. All of those are things that, so if you don't have the other ingredients that we're going to use, you can pretty much get away with just using that pad thai sauce. It's kind of like a bottled ragu, or sort of. So ideally what I'd like to do is find myself some tamarind paste so I don't have to work around the things that are already added here. But the main thing that we're looking for in our sauce today is that tamarind paste, and that's going to give the like deep red color to our pad thai that we're looking for. All right, next up, this is my fish sauce. I'm going to go with 6 tablespoons. In my opinion, I have always said that I think that fish sauce is probably the single most iconic flavor to all Thai food, is that flavor of fish sauce, either that or Thai chilies. That's also the reason why we're going so heavy on that fish sauce today, is because I think it's going to be one of the really, really big outstanding qualities to it. Last up, this is a little bit of fresh lime juice. And then I'm going to save the other half for our garnish. And then I'm going to add, this is just a pinch of kosher salt. And that ought to do it. That's going to be our sauce base here. So what we're going to do is, so we're going to bloom our aromatics today. The aromatics would be our garlic, our ginger, and our shallots. We're going to bloom that in our wok fry, so we're going to throw in a little bit of oil, and then we're going to bloom out those aromatic qualities, and then we're going to add this to our sauce, and that's going to give our sauce that nice aromatic flavor and quality. I'm pretty sure that a bottled pad thai sauce like the one that we're using actually already contains all 3 of these things. But I like to add them anyway because it's going to give more of a fresh quality to it. And honestly, when I eat pad thai sauce, I have never actually tasted any of those things because they're so far buried underneath all of the other crap that they're putting in there. So yeah, that's how we're going to do that. All right, so last up, I'm using this is some pad thai noodles, which I was very fortunate. I went to the market this morning and managed to find some of these. It was literally the last one. Usually I get there around like 9 or 10. Today I got there at like 1:30. It was almost sold out. Fresh pad thai noodles, they're really, really delicious. They're also, just like any time that you're working with fresh chow fun, also very, very delicate. So if you can't get your hands on fresh noodles like this, you can totally make use of dried rice noodles, which will work just as well. But because fresh noodles, as the name implies, are fresh, they're a little bit more tender and a little bit more flavorful, or like not flavorful, but a little bit more tender and just have like a little bit better of a texture. So if you can get your hands on them, I highly recommend it. It does mean that you need to get to the market relatively early. So I always explain it, always talk through this when I talk about chow fun, but it's also true for fresh pad thai noodles too. Is that anytime that you're looking for fresh noodles like this, you generally will only find them in the market the day of. So they will generally only stock enough of the noodles to sell for that day. And that's because within 24 hours, those noodles, like chow fun, or in today's case, pad thai noodles, they go stale pretty much immediately. So if you're trying to get your hands on fresh noodles like this, your best shot at finding them is you need to get there pretty early. So you need to try and get to the market, like I mentioned earlier, probably before noon. Relatively early, you probably want to go there first thing in the morning, and you'll probably find these. Most of the time, if you don't get there before noon, a lot of the restaurants will buy that stock out because they, just like you, are looking for those noodles. And a lot of the times those grocery stores, if you live near a Chinatown district like I do, those grocery stores are stocking, like, usually when I see them in the grocery store, I see them being sold in like huge quantities. So today we're using, this is just 16 ounces, so a pound. But I have also seen them selling like pad thai or chow fun in like 13 pounds or something, you know. And that's because they're selling them to restaurants, and those restaurants are using them in really, really large quantity. So what I'm doing here, just to be certain, is I'm pulling these noodles apart. So I'm trying to make sure that we don't end up with large clumps of noodle. That's really, really important because as the noodles go stale, they become a little bit more delicate to pull apart, more delicate and more difficult to pull apart. So just to make sure that they don't clump up in the wok fry, I want to pull them apart so that we don't end up just dumping this whole stack of rice noodle in there and then just kind of going on blind faith that they're going to come apart. Most often when I'm working with stale chow fun noodles, I have a lot more trouble getting them to pull apart. Today, these are relatively fresh, so they're still pulling apart pretty easily. Sarah, yeah, it's Wednesday. We are streaming today. Yeah, that reminds me I should probably introduce myself. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're normally not streaming on Wednesday. Today we're streaming on Wednesday because I missed the stream on Monday because I was having a barbecue. But we're making it up today on Wednesday. So it is a little bit unusual to see me on Wednesdays because normally I'm not here. But we are still making today. What we're doing is some pad thai. What we're doing right now is pulling apart our pad thai noodles. So if you've ever seen me working with chow fun, you will probably have seen me doing a very, very similar thing. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm pulling each of these noodles apart because if you can see, our chow fun, when it's sold, is boxed up in large clumps. What they're essentially doing is like folding the noodles on top of each other and then just kind of going on a wing and a prayer that they're going to come apart when we start pulling them apart. So what we don't want to do is get into the world of hoping and praying that these are actually going to come apart in the wok fry, which is not good, and I have done that before. And essentially what will happen is if you have relatively stale chow fun, or in this case pad thai noodles, they start falling apart and you get like really, really clumpy bits and chunks of chow fun rice noodles, which we're not after. So just to make sure that these actually come apart, I'm doing it off heat. And you will notice, so you can also see on my hands, they're starting to become very, very greasy. That's also because noodles like rice noodles like this, especially when they're fresh, they're packed in oil. So that's really, really useful in this particular case because it helps you pull them apart and make sure that they don't stick together. That's why they pack it in oil. It's also kind of a problem because it means that we're going to be introducing all of this oil is going to end up in our wok fry. So we want to take that into account as we sort of like start building our wok fry. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a very, very greasy stir fry. So you're not complaining? Yeah. It's totally cool. Yeah. So yeah, the last thing I'll mention is that if you can't get your hands on fresh chow fun or fresh pad thai or fresh rice noodles of any kind really, it's not the end of the world. You can totally just use some plain rice noodles. You can use the dried stuff. The dry stuff is super pantry friendly. I keep that stuff in the pantry for like months, years. You could probably keep it in, it'll probably stay forever. Honestly, you could probably keep it, you could probably use that, keep that stuff in a bomb shelter and it would be fine. Because it is dried out, so it's like dried and then reconstituted in boiling water. So if you can't get your hands on fresh noodles like this, you can totally just make use of that dried stuff. Sorry, stupid camera. Do I ever use bean threads? I'm not sure what a bean thread is. Sounds like maybe vermicelli. I'm not sure what that is. All right. So there's our noodles. We're just finished pulling these apart. You can see all of the oil. It's here down on my cutting board too. And you could definitely see it on my hands too. So they're like really, really oily right now. That's all coming off of the noodles themselves. Here's how our noodles are looking now. We just pulled them all apart so we have this nice separated noodles. They are still very, very, very delicate, just like chow fun. Fresh noodles are super delicate, so when you start throwing those into the wok fry, once they're in the wok fry, you want to start treating these very, very carefully. So once you get these in your wok fry, we're not going to be doing any more aggressive tossing or anything like that. Well, you're not sure, but you bought some for your next stir fry. Yeah, bean threads. What I'm thinking of is bean sprouts, which we're actually using today. This looks like this, bean sprouts. Maybe that's what you're referring to. I'm not actually sure. I have never actually heard it. But we are going to be using some bean sprouts today, so hopefully that's the same thing. All right, so the last thing that we're gonna throw together, I think I said the noodles were the last thing, but the real last thing that we're gonna throw together here is some chicken thigh, which I like using chicken thigh in this particular dish. I know the original recipe I had written actually makes use of firm tofu because we were doing a veggie version of pad thai. But I love using chicken thigh in this case. I've actually done it with many, many kinds of protein. I've also done it with chicken breasts on occasion when I had to. I've done it with tofu. I think I've done it with lamb before, actually, at one point. I love using chicken thigh though because probably number one, it's probably the most iconic thing that you can use in a pad thai. But I also like using it more than I like using chicken breast because the addition of that extra fat, which is all of this white stuff right here. Lots of people say, why don't you pull this white stuff? Why don't you take the fat off of your chicken thigh? I actually think the fat is going to be really, really important, and it's going to help us develop like richness in the stir fry itself. If you aren't able to get your hands on chicken thigh, it's totally fine. You can just use chicken breast, or you can use tofu, or you probably even leave it out entirely. It will still be okay. But when you can, if you can, I love using chicken thigh because that extra fat is going to give us a nice bit of like richness, and it's kind of going to help like build out the thickness of our sauce today. So what I'm doing is I'm chopping this up into relatively thin strips here, so like so, and that's going to give us these nice like thin and like delicate pieces of chicken. And that ought to do it. Alright, so I'm adding this to our bowl here, and then I'm actually going to do a very quick marinade. I normally would default to adding a little bit of soy sauce to my marinades, but I actually don't think that that's going to work out today because I have always made a habit of avoiding soy sauce in pad thai because I feel like it contradicts the qualities of umami that we're looking for in that fish sauce. So the only thing that I'm adding to this today is a little bit of cornstarch and then a pinch of kosher salt. And that's just going to kind of help give it a little bit of depth of flavor. The most important thing in this marinade today is, I wouldn't even call this a marinade really, is that cornstarch. So what it's going to do is it's going to keep the chicken from turning rubbery in our wok fry. That tends to be a really, really important thing to add in a lot of wok fries, anytime that you're working with meats especially, because it will help keep the chicken tender so it won't overcook. Otherwise, because the wok is going to be burning so hot, if you introduce just chicken straight to a wok fry, it will start overcooking on the exterior before the interior is finished cooking. So that cornstarch, it kind of helps slow down that cooking process just long enough so that we can finish cooking the interior. Oh, Japanese noodles. Yeah, totally. I know what you're talking about. I haven't actually tried cooking with them. I know that they're really delicate, so let me know how it goes. I know that they take it takes a lot of caution, just like Sharpen. It requires quite a bit of caution. They always remind me, I'm pretty sure they're pretty similar to vermicelli rice noodles, which is also very, very delicate. Generally, when I work with those vermicelli, at least, all I do is I just throw it in some boiling water and then like blanch it for like a minute, maybe even less, and that will help us keep a really, really like tender but not mushy vermicelli noodle. All right. Cool. So that's our chicken over on the stove. I'm heating up my wok here. I probably should have turned that on earlier. That's okay. I'm gonna get my wok heated up, and then we're gonna start wok frying. The last two things that we're going to be doing is we're going to bloom out those aromatics, and then we're going to add them to our sauce. So I'm going to keep this camera on. There we go. And here's our sauce. It's here ready and prepped. We just assembled this off heat. So what we're going to do is add not very much peanut oil. That will probably only be about 2 tablespoons of peanut oil to start. And then we're going to add those aromatics to our wok fry. And then add those bloomed aromatics back to our sauce here. So what we're trying to do, and the reason that I say is we don't want to use too much oil, is because if we use too much oil and we add that oil to our sauce, it's going to break. and then it's going to create this layer of oil on top, which is not going to be fun. So that's like one of the most important properties about oil when we're talking about sauces is that oil and liquid, they don't mix well. So they will generally, almost always, they're always going to start breaking apart. So they're going to have either a separation, some kind of separation of those liquids, so the oil is going to come up on top. That's science. So since we're dealing with a lot of oil here, we want to be sure that we don't add too much of it. Otherwise, we're going to have this weird thin layer of oil sitting on top of our sauce. So we want to be careful about that. Cool. All right, hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. Obviously, today is not any of those days. It's Wednesday. Like Sarah said, this is not a day that we're normally here. That's because I missed Monday this week. So we're making up that stream today on a Wednesday instead. Just trying to make up for the stream that we missed. So we're here making pad thai today, which is what we're going to be eating for dinner. If you have any questions, feel free and drop those questions in the chat. I don't know everything about pad thai, but I know lots of stuff. Today we're doing a Thai noodle dish called pad thai, like I mentioned just now. Pad thai comes from it comes from Thailand originally, but it's really, really popular here in the States known as one of the most common Thai noodle takeout dishes that you'll come across. It relies very, very heavily on the use of tamarind paste, which is what we have here, mixed with some fish sauce, which are probably the two most iconic ingredients that go into our Thai noodles today. We're also going to be using some fresh pad thai noodles, so those are going to be really, really fun to work with because they're so tasty and really, really delicate, so they're very useful. Yeah. All right. So over on my stove, I have my wok. It has been heating up for a couple of minutes. And then I'm adding that looked like a lot of oil, but it's actually not. That squirt ball goes really fast. And that was maybe 2 tablespoons of oil, and then I'm going to give our wok a long yao. And then we're adding our aromatics first. This is my garlic, followed by my ginger, and finally my shallots. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bloom these out just long enough until they become fragrant. So we don't need these to be completely cooked all the way through. Really what we're just trying to do is look for the fragrant qualities of these aromatics. That's usually, for me, that's about like maybe a minute, maybe a little bit more than that. Those shallots will generally take about a minute to cook all the way through, though. All right. If it's not coming apart, these are going a little bit slower than I like, so I'm going to add a pinch of salt. If you're having trouble getting your onions or shallots, in this case, to shed their moisture or really start breaking down, water tends to help a little bit because it will start causing those onions, or in this case shallots, to start weeping, so it's going to start breaking down a little bit better. I generally, anytime that we're working with fish sauce, or especially if I'm working with tamarind paste, I like to try and hold back on the use of salt as much as possible because I find that it tends to get in the way of the umami qualities that we're looking for from that tamarind paste. So today we did end up using a little bit of salt, but that's going to be okay. All right, so here's our aromatics. I'm going to add this to our sauce here. And then we can put these over here and take a look. So there's our sauce. This is how it's looking now. We just added these to our mixture, our tamarind paste mixture here. And this is going to infuse those aromatics into our tamarind paste. So I believe when you buy a pre-bottled or pre-mixed pad Thai sauce like what we're using today. What they do is they pre-cook it, and then I think what they're doing is they're grinding it into a powder and then integrating it into the tamarind paste in that form. So that's probably still going to get you some kind of quality and flavor to it, but I think it's like not going to be nearly as apparent as if you were adding fresh aromatics like we just did. And what that's going to do is just create a little bit of aromatic quality in that sauce base while we work on our chicken. All right. So over in my wok, I'm doing my very best to make sure that all of that debris still gets out of the wok. That's going to be really, really important. We don't want any of that stuff staying behind, because anything that we just cooked, if it stays in the wok when we're batch cooking like we are right now, it's going to just end up burning. So we don't want any of that stuff to stay behind. Super often you'll see me just rinsing the wok out. It's actually relatively clean, so I'm not going to bother. It's going to just take longer to reheat. But if you do happen to have a lot of debris still left in your wok, I do this especially if I've just been searing stuff. It's really, really important to rinse that stuff out. Otherwise, you're going to have burnt stuff in your wok fry. You had pad Thai yesterday. Yeah, that's one of my favorite noodle dishes for sure. Cool. So if you're not sure if your wok is hot enough yet, generally this is a good sign. When you start seeing smoke like this, that's generally a sign that you have got lots and lots of heat in your wok fry. And next up, we're adding, that's going to be a full 4 tablespoons of peanut oil. And then again, as always, kind of long yao for our non-stick surface. And then first in is going to be our chilies. This is generally most important when we're working with Thai chilies, but anytime that you're working with a chili that still has its seeds in, you want to make sure, number 1, that your overhead fan is on if you've got one, number 2, that your windows are always open, and number 3, that your smoke detectors are also off, because that stuff is going to start kicking up a lot of smoke. And those seeds, they contain a lot of capsaicin, so anytime, I think almost every time that I have worked with Thai chilies, it has almost always caused me to cough. So we will see. But essentially what's happening is when you add those seeds to a wok fry and they hit that hot oil, it causes the smoke to release capsaicin from those seeds. And that smoke, if it's inhaled in large quantities, is not enough to really harm you. But it's caustic and it will definitely harm your lungs. That's the reason why you have to end up coughing a lot. Swiss cheese fries is a good username. Yeah. I'm glad that it's helpful, yeah. Cool. There it goes. Alright, so I'm giving that about maybe a minute head start, and then we're going to add our chicken here, and then we're going to start seeing that cornstarch is going to really start coming into play here, because it's going to slow down the cooking time of our chicken quite a bit. Yeah. What type of wok should you purchase? I know it's not non-stick. Yeah. So what I have, this is a carbon steel wok. That's my favorite metal to have in a wok. I think it has really, really high heat potential. So it heats really, really evenly, and it gets really, really hot. And I would say generally if you see a wok in a restaurant, it's probably carbon steel. It also lasts forever, so carbon steel is a really great one. If you can't get your hands on anything carbon steel, I always say the next best have always been for me either stainless steel, or if you can't, in lieu of that, cast iron is my favorite, especially if you're cooking on an induction or electric range, because it will have really, really good heat retention. But if you're looking for one like mine, this one is made out of carbon steel. But what I always say is generally if you're looking for a wok, any of those metals are going to work fine, but we want to make sure to avoid anything that has Teflon non-stick on it. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to start adding my sauce at each element, or each phase of our wok fry here. So I just added, that was maybe 3 tablespoons to our chicken here. And this is going to just sort of help create a little bit of independent flavor with our chicken. So as we add things back to the wok, I'm going to add a little bit more sauce. And that's just going to help make sure that each element as we add it kind of tastes like something, so you don't end up with a wok fry. And this is probably one of my biggest gripes with a lot of wok fries, that like sort of like has things that taste good, but other things that are really, really bland. So if you've ever had like a noodle dish where the beef is really, really flavorful, but the noodles are not very well seasoned, or vice versa, and you kind of have to eat both at the same time if you want it to taste like something, that's why. All right, so you'll notice that cornstarch is coming into play here. The chicken is slowing down its cooking process quite a bit, which is very, very useful. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding, this is going to go our bean sprouts first, followed by maybe another 2 tablespoons of sauce. Remember, those bean sprouts are pretty delicate, so we don't want them to be in our wok fry any longer than they have to be. And then just like when we are working with chow fun, I'm going to start adding our noodles here a little bit at a time, maybe a handful at a time. And then tossing. But like I mentioned earlier, once those noodles are in our wok fry, we want to stop doing aggressive tossing. So you'll notice that I'm not going to be tossing the wok as aggressively, and not going to really be throwing the spatula around anymore. And that's because we're trying to avoid breaking up these large clumps of noodles. So I'm going to be very delicate now as I add these noodles. So I'm going to add, that was maybe a handful or 2, and then I'm going to add a little bit more sauce here. And then I'm repeating, a little bit more sauce, a little bit more noodle, and again, very gently tossing. What size wok am I using? I believe it is a 16, I think it's a 16-inch wok. I have a couple of woks, so I actually have like 4 woks now. The largest wok that I own, I believe, is 20 inches, which is a little bit too large for a home burner. I actually only use that wok on the wok burner in the backyard because it's a little bit too large, and I can't really get even heating on it on a standard frying, a standard home range like we're using today. So it doesn't really seem to work out well with home range cooking. I also have another one, I think it is 18 inches or maybe it's 16 inches, I forget. Both of which, they don't seem to heat super evenly. Probably the 16-inch would still do reasonably well. But this particular, I love the size of this wok because it still allows the wok to heat evenly on a home range. Alright, so that's all of my noodles here, and almost all of our sauce as well. Next up is our egg, so I'm going to add very intentionally this right on top of our sauce, or our noodles here. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of a shake, and then we're going to give this maybe a minute to set. So very, very important, probably the most important part about how you treat a wok fry when you're working with rice noodles like this, especially in Thai cooking, is once you add those eggs, you want to give it a little bit of time for those eggs to set. I usually say about 30 seconds. If you start tossing it too soon, it's going to turn into, essentially what you're going to be doing is cooking carbonara, and it's going to start creating like creaminess to your sauce, which is going to be really tasty because it's really creamy. But it's not what we're looking for. We're not after the creaminess that an egg will create. What we're trying to do is create these nice lacy bits of egg that we're starting to see form here. So I give that about 30 seconds, and then I'm very gently tossing And as you can see when I'm tossing, these nice lacy curds of egg are starting to form around those rice noodles. I'm actually going to add a little bit more bean sprouts here because I like bean sprouts, and also these are going to go bad soon, so why not? And lastly, the most important thing when we're cooking in a wok is every time that, especially if you're working with eggs, is you want to give this wok a clean while it's hot. So you'll notice, especially since we're working with eggs today, lots of stuff is sticking here. That's okay. While the wok is hot, it has a pretty decent non-stick coating. At least if you've seasoned your wok properly. In my experience, egg tends to stick more than other things. So especially if you're doing pad thai or chow fun and things like that. We want to start scraping all of this leftover stuff off while it's hot. And then give it a rinse. And if you've done it properly, that stuff, it should come right off. So you'll notice didn't do much scrubbing here. And our wok is pretty much clean. And that ought to do it. Cool. So even after I pull this off heat, I'm still being pretty careful about preserving the long strands of noodle here. We want to try and hold those long strands together as much as possible because they're really, really delicate. And then finally, what we're going to do is garnish. This is going to be a little bit of crushed peanut. Not quite as crushed as I'd like them to be. And some fresh cilantro. And then the very last thing that I'm going to add is just a squeeze of fresh lime. And that ought to do it. go. Cool. So that's it, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. So if this is your first time catching one of these and you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, those are out every Friday. So this is actually a pad Thai noodle dish recipe that we did, I want to say it was sometime back in 2020. I think back in like August or September. So it's already out over on the YouTube channel. It was out a long time ago. So if you're looking for those recipes, they already exist over on the YouTube channel. We have new stuff coming out every Friday. So last Friday we came out with a leftover breakfast fried rice, which is like fried rice using a Chinese sausage called lapchang, which is the sort of the fried rice my dad used to make, basically making use out of like leftover eggs and sausage. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely find your way over to the YouTube channel and check out what's going on over there. There's new recipes out every Friday. We're also working our way to 4,500 subs by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please do hop over and subscribe. Lots of fun new stuff coming out there every Friday. Let me know if you do have any other questions. I will do my best to make sure that I answer everyone. I know I miss questions all the time, but hopefully I didn't miss anything. What sauce am I using? Sorry for all the stupid questions. No, that's totally fine. There's no stupid questions. What sauce am I using? Yeah, it was a combination of a couple of things, but the main thing that goes, sauce element that goes into a pad Thai is tamarind paste and fish sauce. Those are probably the big two things that you need. And that's going to create that like really, really iconic like fishy umami that you're looking for is going to be from those two things. And then the third and probably the next most important thing is a little bit of lime juice, and that kind of creates the brightness that we're looking for. So I added the lime juice in a couple of different places. The first one was in the actual sauce that we cooked with, and the second one is actually on the final finish. So it kind of like is the last garnish, kind of creates that nice brightness. Really, really useful. Yeah. Deborah, yeah, thanks so much. Hermina, oh yeah, don't forget the donations. Yeah, so last thing that I'll mention, if you're watching over on YouTube, you'll see a little bar at the top. It is for the donations. I don't ever take money for streaming. I mostly just do it for fun. But I am like actively just trying to make the streams better because a lot of the gear that I have is cheap. So if you're watching, actually I think on both YouTube and Reddit, one of the cameras, actually all four of the cameras are a little bit blurry. That's because they have really crappy capture cards. They're like 30 bucks a piece. Whereas like a really good capture card is usually like 150 bucks or something. So right now we're raising some money to replace those capture cards. We need 4 of them because there's so many cameras going on. So if you want to help us raise some money, please do hop over and give us some donations. But again, don't feel obligated to do that if you can't or if you aren't able. Not a big deal. Cool. All right, thanks everyone. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be here doing dishes, and I'll see you tomorrow. What we're cooking tomorrow? Oh, tomorrow we're going to be doing a Korean dish called a bibimbap, which is a barbecue steak rice bowl. I feel like that adequately describes it. It's a rice bowl that's makes a very specific use out of bulgogi, which is like Korean barbecue steak, so very thinly sliced flank steak. And I don't think we have flank steak, so I think I'm going to be using some skirt steak instead, which is not the same, but close. Cool. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
and everybody wants the food. I still got streets, but they don't love me like they used to love it. And I'm reminded of how bad I used to want it. And yes, I still got streets, but more like a toolkit of my 20s, and it's breaking me down. Want to be, baby, yes I do you want to be? the shelf. In case my little baby girl is in need. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Got another mouth to feed. Leave it with the babysitter, mama call the grave digger. Gone with the fallen leaves. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966 now. Might have had your fill, I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. Let me kick it like it's 1986 now. Might be over now, I can feel it still. We can fight a war for peace. Give in to that easy living. Goodbye to my hopes and dreams. Stop flipping for my enemies. We could wait until the walls come down. It's time to give a little to the kids in the middle. But oh, until it falls, won't bother me.